That was fun. The Baltimore Ravens, they annihilate the Houston Texans in Week 17, and Lamar Jackson forcefully ends the MVP conversation. We dive into an instant reaction post-game edition of Locked On Ravens coming up here.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here on this Christmas Day edition of the show, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel. Also in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe over there as well. We're a 5-day-a-week plus more daily Ravens podcast. So we have Ravens news, analysis, updates for you. We go live after every game like we are right now. Also, we have other bonus content that comes your way every single week on the show. Today's bonus edition, Christmas edition of Locked On Ravens, is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a bigger turn on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $250, in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. It's over, ladies and gentlemen. We were talking about how it wasn't over with Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson. But we kind of, and everybody almost agree with this, it was, all right, if Lamar Jackson goes out there and dominates on Christmas Day against that Houston Texans team, that essentially wraps up the conversation. What did Lamar Jackson do? The Ravens, 31-2, the final score. Baltimore, they now control their AFC North destiny with the Pittsburgh Steelers losing to the Kansas City Chiefs. Man, it is a very Merry Christmas after all, and I hope everybody who is watching, listening, is having a Merry Christmas or had a Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, and man, what a gift. What a holiday gift the Ravens gave us on Wednesday. So the Ravens end their 3-game and 11-day stretch, and this, to me, was a dominant performance, a message. This was a message to the NFL, national television, Christmas Day. Look, if the Ravens go on a run, and who knows if they will, who knows if they won't, we're not there yet. But if they do, I think we'll look back on this game and the Steelers game as the turning points in the season. 2 monumental wins. And this win here, from start to finish, was just all Ravens. It was domination across the board, offensively, defensively, special teams wise. I see it in the comments. We have a lot of people in the comments. It's awesome here. We built an awesome community, video form, audio form on Locked On Ravens. And the thing I'm seeing in the comments most is that this Ravens team is peaking right at the right time, because you're going to go through ups and downs in the season, right? You're going to go through ups and downs. We've been here through the ups. We've been here through the downs. We understand that this Ravens team has great strengths and big weaknesses. But if you're able to combat your weaknesses, get it right over the course of the regular season, and play to your strengths, man, I'll tell you, this Ravens team over the past 2 weeks and some of the performances they've given us over the course of the season, I see it from What Is Love right here. It's not about how you start. It's about how you finish. Baltimore has one more game to run the table after their bye week. And from there, it's the playoffs. It's a whole new season. Anything can happen. But we saw Lamar Jackson be Lamarvelous in this game. First of all, I'm going to give round of applause to Lamar Jackson. Breaks Michael Vick's all-time career rushing record for a quarterback. He did that in this game. Historic from Lamar Jackson. Lamar's one of one. He's an incredible player. He's unbelievable. And the fact that he goes out there and does what he does each and every week is just, it's unbelievable. You know, you feel like you've become numb to Lamar Jackson's greatness, because if you watch the Ravens every week, you see it so often, but he still just absolutely amazes me. He amazes me every week with what he can do, his dynamic ability, both with his arm and with his legs. And to me, I just can't believe that this guy has been able to evolve so much. Lamar had this potential, and I believe that he could get to this point. Like, I believe Lamar, the potential was always there for him. But we're witnessing this in year 7. Lamar Jackson, you know, we're talking about a guy in his prime, or just entering his prime, that is doing this. In this game, he goes 10 of 15 for 168 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, also 4 for 87 and a touchdown there. So we got the Jackson 3 today, or tonight, not the Jackson 5. But the thing with this national TV game, big spot, Christmas, Netflix, like the whole thing, the whole shebang. Lamar Jackson had like 4 MVP plays in this game. And we saw that against Jacksonville last year. We saw that against San Francisco last year. Because when we talk about recency bias, right, when we go to a guy like Josh Allen, who got blown out by the Ravens early in September, people are saying, oh, no, we can't talk about that game. We have to talk about the games that happen because it's what have you done for me now lately? Well, what has Lamar Jackson done for you now lately? Over the course of these last couple of weeks, he's thrown a Jackson 5 against the New York Giants. He has defeated his division rival in the Pittsburgh Steelers that everybody said, oh man, they have his number. He puts up a dominant performance, particularly in the fourth quarter there. And then you go to Houston on Christmas and you play a team that statistically, yeah, they have injuries. I'm not going to say they don't have injuries, but that defense still has talent. And Lamar dominates. Derrick Henry runs wild. To me, saying the MVP race is over with 4 weeks to go without having Lamar have that time. And again, you had those big games on the schedule. You had a game against Pittsburgh. You had a game against Houston. My whole thing was, look, if Lamar puts up stinkers in that game, if Lamar doesn't play well in those games, like, okay. But let's get to those 2 games first because those are going to be the biggest games of the season for the Ravens. And here we are. And Lamar had the throw to Mark Andrews where he's running around and scrambling around and doing his thing. He has the touchdown pass to Isaiah Likely where he makes an all-pro and Daniil Hunter look absolutely silly. He has a couple of other big runs. He has a big touchdown. I mean, it's those big plays. And so to me, when you talk about that was the narrative coming into this game, right? For a lot of people, RG3 said it, a lot of other people said it. If Lamar has a big game against Houston on Christmas, he is going to be the one that wins the award. Now, of course, there are bigger things than the MVP, right? I'm sure Lamar would trade all 2 or hypothetically 3 of his MVPs to host a Super Bowl trophy. The MVP is not the most important thing we're talking about here. Of course not. The Super Bowl, the Lombardi trophy, that's more important. But if a guy deserves the award, give him the award. And I was blown away by how Lamar just made it look so easy again. He makes it look so easy most days. And for a player that has so much dynamic ability and is so fun to watch and is so exciting to watch, this is a guy that, look, sometimes people just want to be wrong about Lamar. And what I mean by that is sometimes people are so stuck up in maybe the way they thought his evaluation was draft-wise coming out or what their perception of him was in his first couple NFL seasons. But you can't even say couple because 2019 he won the MVP doing dominant things. Like, this is a player that has earned so many people's respect across the league over the course of his career, but there is still that I guess group of people that doesn't want to accept that. Now, I agree with this one here, this comment here. MVP3, done deal. I don't think it'll be unanimous either because, look, Josh Allen is having a fantastic year. Josh Allen is a heck of a player. Josh Allen, if Lamar wasn't having the year he was having, by far and away would be the MVP. But you look at the stats, you look at all this other stuff that goes into it, and I feel like, if Josh Allen gets votes, yeah, he's definitely going to get votes, and he deserves to get votes. But I think that if we're sticking with what the narrative was coming into this game, which I am absolutely going to do, it was if Lamar dominates Houston, the Ravens dominate Houston, he wraps up that conversation. That's exactly what happened. He had MVP moments. He had them on national TV. The NFL, they flexed Josh Allen into that 425 spot against the Patriots. Maybe it was to say, hey, maybe Josh can have this big game against the Patriots. He can help his case. Josh put up a stinker against the Patriots. The Bills won, but that's what happened. The Ravens have clawed back into this. And when you talk about 2 seed versus 3 seed, Ravens have the head-to-head, all of that. I'm not counting 2 losses there and saying, oh, that's going to be the difference, right? That's going to be the difference. So I was super impressed with Lamar in this game. I'm blown away every single week, honestly. He always has one of those plays, right? He always has one of those plays. And this is a big one too. Maximilian with the comment here. Ravens have beaten every AFC playoff team except Kansas City. It's all about that potential rematch. And we'll talk about some playoff scenarios in the final part of the show because last week, or just a couple of days ago, honestly, on the post-game show we did for Pittsburgh, I had it all laid out for Baltimore in the first round. I think I have Baltimore's path in general to the Super Bowl. So we're going to talk about that, but I just can't I can't stop gushing about Lamar here because he deserves it here. And Derrick Henry went off 27 carries for 147 yards and a score. The Texans couldn't stop him. There was the threat of Lamar with his legs as well. Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson feed off of each other, right? There's this whole thing about, let's pit Derrick Henry against Lamar Jackson. Let's pit Lamar Jackson against Derrick Henry. Let's say that, Lamar is only good or is only having the year he's having because of Derrick Henry. That's not it. Both guys benefit from each other. Lamar benefits from Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry benefits from Lamar. That's exactly what it is. So in my opinion, this is your MV3. There were like 4 plays in this game where you could say, all right, there it is, right there. Josh Allen has had those moments too. He had that run against the Chiefs. He had a couple of big plays here a couple of weeks ago. But again, this is what have you done for me now lately, league? And I think that Lamar Jackson is your MV3, especially now with just 1 week to go here for the Ravens, 2 obviously for the Bills. If Josh wins it, he's had a great season. But in my opinion, I just don't know how you don't hand this award to Lamar Jackson based off of everything that we have seen from him this year and the consistent play overall. Every game hasn't been a great game from Lamar. I'm not sitting here telling you that it is. But guys have their struggles. And if we want to compare, for example, Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen in their Texans matchups, because this is a game that people forget about as well. Lamar, his final stat line again, 10 of 15, 168 passing yards. You had the 2 touchdowns there. He also had the 87 rushing yards and the 1 touchdown on the ground. Josh Allen against this same Texans defense, albeit I guess their Texans defense had a few more injuries, but regardless, they still had studs. Will Anderson was playing for the Texans in this game. Hunter was. Derek Stingley. Josh Allen, 9 for 30, 131 passing yards, 54 rushing yards, 1 touchdown. And that was a 3-point loss. Baltimore comes out of this game with a 29-point win. So, look, I know there have been a bunch of narratives pushed. Lamar Jackson's got plenty of praise as well, but it just feels like people are trying to set up the MVP for Josh Allen. Well, there's only so much you can set up before you actually have to take into account the games. You actually have to take account into the stats. I feel like that's what we're witnessing here with Lamar Jackson. So, coming up in the second part of the show, this was not all the Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry show. I want to dive into the Ravens' annihilation of the Texans, but I want to talk about that defense because you know what? We're going to give Zach Orr a round of applause and sing his praises because that was a Ravens shutout defensively. So be sure to stay tuned. We have so much to get to on the celebratory Christmas Day, or I guess Christmas night now, instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens post-game. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel and the NFL playoffs. They're almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel, so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It really is thrilling. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sports partner of the NFL. Back here on Locked On Ravens, we're celebrating on Christmas night. It's Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, talking Ravens football. Ravens give us the best gift of all here on Christmas and this holiday season. 31-2 win in primetime on national television against the Houston Texans. Dominant performance offensively, defensively, special teams-wise. I was expecting a Ravens win. If you listened to our pregame show earlier today, I had said my final score prediction was 27-17. I guess I was a little generous, or I guess, not generous enough for the Ravens and honestly for the Ravens defense. So we are a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast. It's been incredible growing this audio form, video form. We've hit a bunch of milestones recently, 10,000 subscribers in video form. We had our first 30,000 view episode. It's almost 40,000 now. And in audio form, we're growing each and every single day there as well. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form and tell your friends and family we're here for them as well as here for you on Locked On Ravens. Now, we need to talk. We talked a lot about Lamar Jackson in that first part of the show. I want to flip the field here, talk a bit about this defense. This defense, Zach Orr, this was a defensive shutout, and we're giving another round of applause for Zach Orr in this game. This defense struggled at the beginning of the season, right? That defense in Baltimore, the run defense was always good, but there were issues communication-wise. There were issues with the pass defense. There were issues with guys not being in position, weird play calls, not enough execution. That, to me, was a lot of inexperience from Zach Orr. It was a lot of mistakes from other players. Roles weren't really established, or at least not the correct ones. The Ravens made the adjustments defensively with guys like Marcus Williams out, Ardarius Washington in, Eddie Jackson out, Trenton Simpson out. You bring guys like Chris Ford, Malik Harrison in. But Zach Orr, who, look, on Locked On Ravens, my thing is I want to criticize when criticism is due, and I want to praise where praise is due, right? I don't really want to go one way or the other in this situation. But in my opinion, the thing that Zach Orr has done is, I think, with that closed door open forum meeting, he has leaned into his players a little bit more here. He really wants their opinions. He wants this to be an all-inclusive effort. Not that he didn't want to do that at the beginning of the season, but they bring in DMP, so I think it's been a very refreshing veteran voice here. They've moved Kyle Hamilton around, like I've talked about, and I want to give another shout-out to our Ardarius Washington, man. He, in my opinion, I think the Ravens still win this game despite everything, and I think they win the Pittsburgh one too, despite everything too. But Ardarius Washington has essentially made 2 game-changing plays in 2 weeks that have given the Ravens back momentum. When it felt like maybe it was slipping through their fingers, when it felt like this could maybe be weird, this could be a weird Christmas Day game, Ardarius Washington absolutely thumps Joe Mixon before getting in the end zone. Trey White finishes him off. And actually, Zach Orr tried to go and do a dive at Ardarius Washington on the sideline. I think it was Zach Orr. It was one of the coaches. Zach Orr, I forget who it was. But that coach, Ardarius Washington, was out there decking opposing players and decking his own coaches. So it was crazy. That's the second big-time play like that Ardarius has made in 2 weeks. You look at the defense. The Ravens on the day were just absolutely incredible. 5 sacks, 6 tackles for loss. You have Roquan with a sack. Kyle Van Noy, 11.5 sacks. By the way, for those that don't know, his cap hit is only $3.6 million this year. Chris Board had a sack. Nnamdi Madubuike, Adafe Owe. This team just got after it. And look, Houston's offensive line is not very good. They've had injuries there. They've really struggled, and Baltimore's defensive front was getting so much push up front that Joe Mixon couldn't do much of anything in this game. And man, what a fall it's been for CJ Stroud here, if we're being honest. The Texans let the Ravens off the hook a couple of times. That play to Dalton Schultz, where I don't think there was any Ravens defender in front of him for yards and yards and yards and yards. But those are the types of plays that CJ has to hit. And he was missing on a lot of throws tonight that I really felt like were makeable throws. He had a pick that was thrown to Kyle Hamilton after Kyle Hamilton had a little bit of trash talked his way by CJ a little bit earlier. And man, I'm telling you, it's going to be interesting to see how this Ravens defense continues to evolve. The Ravens held CJ Stroud to 185 yards in this game, 1 interception, no touchdowns. And the Texans, it felt like they were scared of the Ravens. It truly, to me, felt like they were scared of the Ravens because they were going for it on 4th down really early in this game. They had to go for it on 4th down, and then they tried to spam the run early, and then they realized, hey, we can't keep up with Baltimore like this, especially with how good this Ravens run defense has been. Joe Mixon finished the day, 9 carries for 26 yards. That's 2.9 on the ground. Joe Mixon has had some good games against the Ravens in Cincinnati. He also has been on the struggle bus a couple of times. Other than that, look, the Ravens held the Texans to 3.4 yards per carry. Nico Collins got a couple big plays, but I thought that they held him in check pretty well. There was that one crazy pass interference on Marlon Humphrey that got the Texans down into Baltimore's red area. But you look at some of the team stats here, and the first quarter was extremely dominant. Baltimore's first quarter, that was one of the most dominant first quarters I have ever seen over the course of me covering this team, watching this team. It was absolute domination. I'll pull those stats up in a couple of minutes. But overall, the Ravens had 25 first downs compared to Houston's 10. Houston went 4 of 15 on 3rd down, 0 for 2 on 4th down. The Ravens go 4 of 9 on 3rd down. They get over 200 more total yards than Houston, more passing yards, almost 200 more rushing yards. Penalty-wise, the Ravens 3 for 30. Another good penalty day for the Ravens. Again, one of those penalties was not a good call on Marlon Humphrey. Baltimore's played very disciplined, but here's my thing. I'm saying I'm not jinxing it because I'm not. I'm saying up to this point. So I'll knock on wood for those people who are superstitious. I myself am superstitious. But the Ravens have been healthy. Up to this point, they've been healthy. I don't think anybody got injured. I know Nate Wiggins left the game, but he came back. But I don't think anybody got injured. At least I don't remember anybody getting injured. I don't feel like I remember anybody getting injured. If someone did, please let me know. I'm also trying to peruse through Twitter here as we go on Locked On Ravens here live, seeing what people are saying. I mean, we have Odell Beckham praising Lamar Jackson, and it just all of what we've seen from this Ravens team over the last 2 weeks has inspired confidence in them from me. Do they have weaknesses? Sure they do. Every team does. But it's about how you finish, how you get into the playoffs. And I feel like, in my opinion, you look at the Ravens just dominating a team like Houston, who, despite them having flaws, despite them having injuries, that is a playoff team. That's a team. And look, are they a one and done? Probably. I think we're going to see, and again, we'll get into this in the playoff scenario segment and coming up in just a couple minutes. But I think now everybody sees, and I think people saw beforehand, but now I think you have a clear picture of why I felt like Baltimore's preferred playoff matchup was the Houston Texans in round one. Now, obviously, in my opinion, like, look, I'd rather have the AFC North. I'd rather have the home playoff game. That, to me, is the most important thing. But I think Pittsburgh, who was going to be the 5 seed, looks that way. I think that they, or even if it's the Chargers, or even if it is the Ravens, who knows? There's still a shot the Ravens don't win the North, but I think Houston's going to get bounced in the first round by whoever it is. And Baltimore, if they were to lose this game to Houston, would have been pretty disastrous. But I was so impressed with the defense because it just felt like guys were playing on a string. Felt like everybody was connected. Everybody knew what everybody was doing. There were only really 1 or 2 plays that I felt like, oh, okay, there was a miscommunication there, or the help didn't come fast enough, or something along those lines. It really was an all-around dominant day, and that's what it should have been. This is what it should have been, and I'm really glad it was able to be this, because this, to me, is another momentum game. It was starting off with the Giants after the bye week. That's not a good team, but you want to blow out that team so you can have momentum going into a big divisional matchup against Pittsburgh. Then you win that game, and pretty handedly in the fourth quarter particularly. Then you're like, all right, hey, we're feeling good about ourselves now, right? Let's go. And let's go play this Houston team. And then they obviously blow out Houston. You have another chance for a momentum game against Cleveland coming up next week. The Ravens have another mini bye. It's actually a longer mini bye than it would have been if the Ravens played on Thursday. And that, to me, is why it was so key Baltimore was able to come out of this mostly healthy. It's because if a lot of teams have dealt with injuries, you know, those 4 teams that played 3 games in 11 days, Baltimore, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, and Houston, the other 3 teams suffered some decent injuries. Like Chris Jones had to miss the game today earlier against Pittsburgh because he suffered an injury. This, in my opinion, is a team in Baltimore that it's all setting up for them. Now, is that guaranteed that they go to the Super Bowl and win it? Absolutely not. They have to perform. They have to play well, and they have to kind of shake some of those playoff ghosts that they have had over the last couple of seasons, especially as the 1 seed. But I honestly feel like, look, winning the North, being the 3 seed, and having a home playoff game and continuing your momentum, not having that time off, continuing your momentum, business as usual, I think that will be what maybe propels the Ravens this season. Who knows? So, man, dominant win all the way across the board. And coming up in the final part of the show, we're going to be talking about, because I talked last week about how I figured out Baltimore's first round opponent. I have their entire playoff map figured out now. So be sure to stay tuned for that. We have plenty to talk about on this post-game Christmas night instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by PrizePicks, and today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy, whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports. PrizePicks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can out to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, PrizePicks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. This week, I'm looking at Jared Goff for more than 230 passing yards and Saquon Barkley for more than 1 touchdown. It's quick, simple, and so much fun to challenge myself and my friends. Down the PrizePicks app today, use code LOCKEDON NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play your first $5. PrizePicks, run your game. We're back here. Final segment, live Locked On Ravens instant reaction post-game show. Kevin Ostreicher still rocking out with you here on this Christmas night. Again, hopefully your Christmas and your holidays have been filled with joy, family, friends, football. I mean, we certainly got a gift for this team and the Ravens, who just dominate the Houston Texans. As always here, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. We're building an awesome community on Locked On Ravens, even on social media, on Twitter, Chaos Record 34, almost to 40,000 followers there. And Instagram, I'm starting that up for like the 8 billionth time, so you can follow me over there, Chaos Record 34 as well. And by the way, I love to hear where people are tuning in from. So in the comments, in the live chat, be sure to tell me where you're tuning in from. I know we have a lot of people who are Baltimore-based, but we also have a bunch of people in this community who are watching from outside of Baltimore and outside of Maryland, sometimes even outside the U.S., which is awesome. So be sure to tell me where you're listening from, where you're watching from. I'd love to hear it. But let's talk about this Ravens team in the playoffs, because we can talk all about the Houston game. We can talk all about, how this team has dominated since their bye week. But the thing in Baltimore, and if you've been with me for a while on Locked On Ravens, if you have been an everydayer, my whole mantra, and this really feels like the mantra in Baltimore, it's regular season is great. Establish trends, go out there, do your thing, find your weaknesses, correct them, find your strengths, play to them. None of that matters. The playoffs, that's what matters. And playoffs can come down to a couple of things. Playoffs can come down to matchups. Playoffs can come down to injuries. Playoffs can come down to just if you had a good or bad day that day. But I talked about how, in my opinion, Baltimore's first round matchup was going to be the Los Angeles Chargers. I still hold true in that. I believe Baltimore wins the AFC North. They are now that. And if they win against Cleveland, it's winning you're in, or winning you win, I guess, the division. The Ravens now control their own AFC North destiny, as I mentioned at the top of the show. If they win, it doesn't matter if Pittsburgh wins or loses. They win the North. They get the 3 seed. And Pittsburgh has the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Chargers because they won earlier in the season. So Chargers would have to win both their games, and Pittsburgh would have to lose both their games for the Chargers to flip-flop over, or I guess for the Chargers to flip-flop over the Steelers for the 5 seed, which still is possible. So it could either be the Steelers coming back to M&T Bank Stadium to play the Ravens if the Ravens win on Sunday against Cleveland, or it's the Chargers coming to M&T Bank Stadium, and it's the horrible part 2 of this season. So I personally like both those matchups. I probably feel a little better against the Chargers just because we know those Steelers games can get so weird. But the Steelers have looked absolutely broken over these last couple of weeks, particularly today against the Chiefs. I'd feel good against Baltimore in either of those matchups. So let's assume Baltimore wins that game. I then feel like Baltimore, Buffalo, whoever it is, between Denver, Cincinnati, whoever, I feel like Buffalo will win that game. And then it will be Baltimore-Buffalo in the divisional round. Baltimore going to Buffalo to play that game. I like the way Baltimore matches up with Buffalo. Josh Allen, as we mentioned, heck of a player, having a great season, an incredible season. But that Bills defense has looked abysmal over the last couple of weeks. And I just don't think they have the manpower up front to stop the Ravens. So I would predict Baltimore to win that game. And then it all comes down to the team that I think we've all had circled on our calendar here in Baltimore for the past however many years you want to go back. It is the Kansas City Chiefs. Can you finally go over and beat the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead? That would be the AFC Championship game. So that's my prediction. It's Chargers, Bills, Chiefs is going to be the Ravens' path. Possibly Steelers, Bills, Chiefs for the Ravens' path. But it's games like this that give you confidence, because there were a bunch of times in this game against Houston where I was like, man, who is stopping this? Like, obviously, teams with less injuries, teams with more power up front, like, yes, there are better ways to stop the Ravens than a team that Houston has put together this season. But I just feel like with Derrick Henry, it gets harder and harder to tackle him over the course of a year. He's better as the year goes on. Lamar Jackson playing at this historic MVP pace again. It just feels like the Ravens are getting their stuff together at the right time, right? And this would be a thing too. Ravens 76B more saying, hey, there's a chance that the Chiefs would get upset before the Ravens played them. Now, that would have to be the Steelers most likely, in my opinion, because I don't think Houston's getting out of the first round, or maybe it is the Chargers, who knows. But, man, could you imagine the AFC Championship game in Baltimore with Baltimore as the 3 seed? That would be crazy. I would absolutely love that. But, look, my takeaways from this game against Houston, I feel like the Ravens have turned into this well-oiled machine, because we've talked a lot about earlier in the season how it usually felt like one unit was playing great and then two units weren't. Two units are playing great and then one unit wasn't, right? Really felt like the team wasn't all in sync with each other, and either one unit would have to bail out the other two, or they have to overcome poor play from one of their units. I felt really good, for the most part, about how Baltimore's team has looked together, offensively, defensively, and special teams-wise. Seems like today this was the most complete team win they've had, like just domination on all three levels. And we should not make this out to be, oh, the Texans are a bad team. They're not a bad team. The Giants, that's a bad team. Giants are a bad team. The Texans are not. This was an impressive win by so many different metrics, by so many different angles. Like I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that we're seeing this version of the Ravens, because I know there are a lot of question marks when they started 0-2, when they were wondering, oh, okay, you lose to a team like Cleveland and then Philly comes into your house and beats you down a little bit. Who is this Ravens team? It doesn't matter who you are at the beginning of the season. You're able to correct your mistakes, correct your weaknesses, and get better. What matters is who this Ravens team is right now and who they are going into the playoffs. So I see Rob here, can't get the playoff jitters. You're 100% correct. You cannot. You have to step up when the lights are the brightest, when it matters the most. The Ravens have had a bunch of heartbreak moments. They've had a bunch of heartbreak moments over the course of Lamar Jackson's tenure with the team. And I think that has shaped them. Now, but they have to be able to kind of do this thing, right? Because how many more excuses can we make? And I'm not making excuses for the way the Ravens have played in the playoffs. It hasn't been good enough. It has not been whatsoever. But in my opinion, you need to be able to go out there and do this thing, because, oh, we can talk about, oh, this is a fun Houston win. This was a fun Pittsburgh win. They've had, oh, that Buffalo game was awesome. Remember how we talked about last year? We don't talk about last year, because it is so painful to remember how that team had it all set up. They had the postseason roster. They had the postseason coaching staff. They had everybody playing together. The locker room was great. And then all of a sudden you drop the biggest game of the season, and now no one talks about that year because it's too painful to bring up. Lamar Jackson had one of the best plays I've ever seen in that game against Kansas City, but we don't talk about it because of how painful it was. And that regular season was the most dominant team in the regular season that we have seen Baltimore have. And there have been a couple of those teams. Obviously, the year in 2019, a couple more than that as well. But we don't talk about that year because we don't want to talk about that year, because the regular season doesn't matter. It's what you do in the postseason. In games like this against Pittsburgh, games like this against Houston, those are the types of momentum-building wins you can build upon, but none of it matters if you can't do your thing in the playoffs. I do think that having the week instead of the week off, so you're playing in the wild card round instead of the actual bye week and having to go through, it's like a weird week of practice. Like maybe you practice, maybe you don't. Bye weeks are great, like getting healthy and all that. I'm not trying to discount all that, but I just feel like this team thrives off of, hey, we're coming for you each and every week. You're going to have to see us, because again, here's the thing with the Ravens. The Ravens will see a bunch of good teams in the playoffs. They'll see a bunch of good teams. And yeah, the Ravens have to go see them, but those teams have to go see the Ravens. And the Ravens are a heck of a team as well. So, man, I'll tell you, I'm fired up after this win, because, there's all this conversation, whether it be around the MVP, whether it be around the Ravens, and just, it feels like a lot of the early season frustrations, we can just kind of like exhale and let that go. Again, is this a perfect team? No, they're not a perfect team, but they're playing a whole heck of a lot better than they were to start the year, a whole heck of a lot better than they were in some of those losses. And that is really big. And I'll bring up this comment here from Pablo, because we do have to talk about Keaton Mitchell a little bit. And this is a good point from Pablo. I hope they use more Keaton in a way he can take advantage of his speed and not try to make him play the Henry kind of route. I think that Keaton can be a really big asset for them. And it was Rasheen Ali. Rasheen Ali got ruled out too. If someone put it in the comments, thank you. I didn't see it, but Rasheen Ali was someone. So depending on what happens with Rasheen Ali, maybe Keaton Mitchell will get more of an opportunity. I think Keaton Mitchell deserves more of an opportunity. I've talked about here on the show how maybe it's just like he doesn't trust his body enough, or maybe Baltimore's not coming. I don't know what the deal is with Keaton, why he's not been playing. Your guess there is as good as mine. But I do believe that Keaton does deserve more of an opportunity there for sure. So, Joe, appreciate you making it in. Merry Christmas, and appreciate everybody for telling me where they're from. I saw it all the way up here. We had Arkansas, we have Baltimore, California. I mean, we have people absolutely everywhere here on Locked On Ravens. So thank you for that. And Woodrow, appreciate you as well. Hit that like button and subscribe. We here are a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast. So we bring you Ravens content. We'll be right back here tomorrow talking Ravens football, talking Lamar Jackson MVP and what some of the MVP voters are now saying about Lamar Jackson, because hint, hint, some of them have flipped over to Lamar Jackson. So that's all I have for you here today on this instant reaction post-game edition of Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much again for tuning in. On the way, I hit that like and subscribe button and follow along in audio form. And here it is. Look at this. We got Mexico, Wyoming, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Essex, Kentucky, Springfield, Illinois, and so much more. So thank you for all the support here on Locked On Ravens. Truly means the world to me. Have a great rest of your Christmas, a great rest of your holiday, and I will see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.